All right, Pacers fans, we are back for yet another episode of the Pacers Post Up. I am no longer in my garage, Ryan. I've got a nice flat black background for us. So hopefully the YouTube viewers are enjoying that a little bit more. But this is not emergency podcast by any stretch of the imagination, but it is instant reaction podcast. The NBA dropped their schedule at 3 o'clock Eastern here on Thursday. So Ryan and I are jumping on to kind of give our quick reaction to the Pacers schedule finally being unveiled, right? We talked a little bit on the last episode about the preseason action in Ames, Iowa at Iowa State. Tyrese Haliburton's alma mater. You'll get some preseason action with the Minnesota Timberwolves there. But the NBA had kind of leaked some opening night games the first week, Christmas Day games. And per usual, the snubbing was on from an Indiana perspective. And that shouldn't be a surprise to any Pacers fan out there. The Tyrese Haliburton return is not a narrative that, especially now after seeing the schedule, it is not a narrative the league cares about at all. And I think that is very telling considering how electrifying his postseason run was the last time he was on an NBA court. So that's certainly something to talk about, Ryan, as we sort of get into now the full schedule. I think there are certainly some interesting things. The schedule has some ebbs and flows, if you will. I know fans are always interested in nationally televised games, back-to-backs, marquee matchups, things like that. And we're going to try and hit all that at the high level. But Ryan, I'm going to kick it over to you to sort of give us a little bit of your grouping, right? I know just to set the table for the fans, Ryan has sort of broken the schedule down into some groups that hopefully are going to make this make a little bit more sense for fans. And then we can dive into some of the must-see games, things that we're excited about, et cetera. But Ryan, where do you want to kick us off?
Well, you start with the beginning of the season. And I love how you set me up, Brad, because we are just going to be kind of talking about what's going to happen in each section of the season. That's kind of how we wanted to break this down. So it wasn't like we were just jumping from game to game all over the place. And so I've broken each section of the season kind of based on like strength and what I want to happen. And then for a little fun, gave each one kind of a movie TV theme. So games 1 through 12, which is October 21st through November 11th. I have the Ricky Bobby, I want to start fast part of the season. And that is
Love it.
because the beginning of the season, for the large part, is pretty easy to start. We've got New Orleans, Dallas, Brooklyn, Milwaukee, Brooklyn again, Atlanta, Memphis. Like, these are games you want to win and get off to a hot start. I remember a few years ago, Rick even came out and said a very different tone where he was like, we've got a really hard start to the season. Don't be surprised if we're kind of in the mid 500 range, catching our feet. Where this year, even though knowing we got to kind of build a little bit new chemistry with Tyrese returning, Zubac's in the lineup, I still think we want to start really strong against these teams because it's going to get a lot harder once we start getting into early November and late December. And there's some fun games still in there. At Miami, we're going to get an early look at LeBron on Wednesday, the 28th, right before Halloween, which will be fun. Although the one sad part, and I think the biggest thing surfacing on Pacers Twitter right now, is Tyrese's return is away, which really sucks. And I don't know how the schedule makers do that. Do I think it really ruins the moment overall? Like, the first game is going to be Friday or October 23rd against Dallas at home. We'll be at that game. The emotions will be real. Would have I liked it to be an opener at home so it felt kind of like starting new, brand new? Yes. Does it really change how it's going to feel in the building? No. So what were your thoughts on that? Because I know a lot was going around on us not getting that first game.
Ryan, I vehemently disagree with your soft take
Okay,
here.
good.
I think this
Good.
is an absolute drubbing by the league. Okay. Tyrese gave them the most historic clutch moment, fireworks postseason, frankly, that maybe has ever happened in
No
league
question.
history.
Yeah.
I don't even think that's a hot take at
It's
this
not.
point. And so for the league to say, okay, you've been rehabbing, you've been out for 16 months by the time the season kicks off, and we're just going to have you debut in New Orleans of all places? I think it is a farce. I think it is a total missed opportunity from a league standpoint. I have long made the argument that Tyrese Haliburton is a face of the league candidate that the league refuses to lean into. There are so many boxes that he checks as a star player. And for whatever reason, the league just wants guys that are going to put up 30 and don't do anything else. And we've seen time and time again, that's not what ultimately wins out in this league. It's why we have had, a new champion for the last, I can't even know, 6, 7, 8 years, whatever it's been, because basketball is being won in different ways. It is not the Benedict Mathurin, oh my God, he went off and he can score. I'm sorry, Pacers fans. It's just not. It's Tyrese Haliburton. It's guys that have great feel for the game. And the league has totally cut him out at the knees, literally, in terms of his return, because it's not just the New Orleans road game, Ryan. It's the Dallas home game to start. Give us some juice. Like, there is no history with Dallas. There's no meaning in that game. I get it, Cooper Flag, but the star power is not there. Give us an OKC, give us a Knicks, give us a Philly, Boston, Miami, even Cleveland. There are stories abound. And I understand that a lot of those teams are in our cup, right? They're in the cup group that we're in. And so you're trying to work in early games with some of those teams, and you probably can't do it on the home opener for the Pacers. But I just felt like there was no attention given to Tyrese Haliburton's return. And I think it's sad, frankly, for the league and certainly for Pacers fans. Now, you said it. It's not going to rain on our parade. We're going to be in the building. That is going to be absolutely electric. I will not walk in there thinking, man, I wish it was the Thunder, not the Mavericks. I'm going to be walking in there thinking, my God, I cannot wait to see this guy back on the floor. And that is the headline of the first 12 games, right? There's some other unique things in there. Obviously, you've got the Miami, Philadelphia. The Denver home game is actually in Mexico City. So for Pacers fans that are hoping to get an eye on Nikola Jokic this year, not going to happen at Gainbridge Fieldhouse. But I think that's going to be fun. I thought it was interesting that it's not nationally televised. So they're doing an international kind of showcase, very similar to the Paris games last year, but in Mexico City. Not going to be on national TV, which I think is a little weird, but hopefully we'll get a Chris and Quinn call on that. But Ryan, I'll make one more note before I kick it back to you. We started that finals run year. It is much noted, 10-15. We cannot do that with this schedule, right? These first 12 games, you really should be above 500, right? I know we're working Tyrese back in the lineup. You're working Zubats into the lineup. All these, Kelly Oubre, new faces, et cetera. But Brooklyn twice, Milwaukee, Memphis is not a team that you look at. New Orleans on opening night is not somebody that you look at and say, okay, I'm really scared. Miami's going to be working a bunch of new guys in. Philly's working new guys in. Like, there are a lot of games that you could circle and say, we should probably come out of these first 12 games 7-5 at worst. And maybe it could be better than that. It'll be very interesting to see how that goes if we don't, because then the story really starts to shift. So first 12 games, I think it's a cupcake kind of schedule from a strength of schedule perspective, but an absolute missed opportunity from the league and really pretty disrespectful to Tyrese.
Yeah, I love your energy there. And maybe I was too soft on the Tyrese shame there. So we will see. Still will be fun to get Tyrese back, but I love what you're saying about this next stretch gets really hard. And so my next set of games basically goes from mid-November all the way through Christmas. And the theme here is Game of Thrones, winter is coming, because this is a brutal stretch. It's about 18 games, 11 on the road, 4 back-to-back. We got multiple cup games in there. You've got a road trip with 2 back-to-backs, one in LA, one in Utah and Denver. A lot of highlight games in here. You've got Philly again. You've got Denver. You've got Utah, Chicago, OKC, the Knicks. Like, this is a brutal stretch of the season, but it also might be the most fun stretch of the season because there are so many good games, and I outlined them there just a second ago, to get excited about. It'll be the second time we see the Knicks, the OKC remake. We've got Detroit even in there, but it's tough. There's multiple 3-game road trips. There's a 5-game road trip in there. There's a lot of back-to-backs. And so coming off, that's where you say if we don't start 7-5 or at least 6-6, you've got an uphill battle right here. And luckily after this, we'll get tonight into the next stretch of games, but you gotta hold the horse here a little bit, because most of the teams you're playing, just to kind of start reading, it's New York, OKC, Philly, Chicago, Cleveland, Atlanta, Detroit, Golden State, Portland, LA. Like, those are mostly playoff teams in that mix. And the theme of this season, most teams are trying to be playoff teams, partially because there's a lot of all-in moves. The new lottery rules could be set into place, so a lot of teams aren't doing what we used to. But this is going to be tough and really fun. So of this schedule, what kind of stood out? Because I would argue, I think this is the hardest stretch we have.
There's no question, Ryan, it's the hardest stretch. What stood out to me is a couple of things. You're getting Philadelphia 3 times by the end of November, right? And so for those that are, want to see LeBron in the building, you're going to get 2 chances at that, one on the road. One of them is a cup game, and that's at home. The other thing that stands out is New York twice. And we only get New York 3 times this year, and I don't want to spoil the big finish here. We'll get to that probably in another segment. But, yeah, you're talking about New York twice, Philly 3 times. Those are potential playoff matchups that you're kind of feeling those matchups out very early in the season. And I think that that's always something to note, because we know how much momentum plays later in the year going into the playoffs. What does health look like? Rotation, who's actually going to be in that, 7, 8, 9-man rotation if you're the Pacers, maybe 6, 7, 8-man rotation if you're Knicks or Philly. And none of that's really going to be flushed out early in the season. So I'm always excited for those kind of big marquee matchup games, but I don't know how much you're gleaning from a mid-November game against New York or Philly at this point. But to your point, it's not just New York and Philly. You're throwing in other teams. You've got the cup game at Cleveland. You've got, Chicago, who's not going to be great, but you've got another Cleveland, Atlanta, Detroit. You mentioned them. Like, there's no real, teams that are Brooklyn, Milwaukee, Wizards, I guess they're not really, but I still throw them in that bucket until proven otherwise. There's no real cakewalk kind of in this middle part of the season. And so I love the Game of Thrones call out, by the way, because it is winter is coming. We know Indianapolis, that daylight savings comes, and it's like, oh my God, it's dark at 5. This is a tough stretch of the schedule, and it's why I think those first 12 games are so critical that we get off to a hot start, because you could theoretically, Ryan, be coming into the new year close to 500, depending upon how Tyrese works his way back up. We mentioned it on the last episode. He says he's ready to play today, and we're recording this in August, all right? So he should be ramped up, I would think, by the calendar turning over into 2027. But make no mistake about it, this is going to be a tough stretch of games, and it's going to be very interesting. We've talked, I think the one other thing that I have to mention in this segment is, for Pacers fans, we're going to get basketball regardless here in Indy, Hinkle Fieldhouse, NBA Cup. Like, I know we're in the group of death, and we may not be, once it gets through the knockout round and all that, who knows if we're going to be playing in those games here. But if there is any sort of semblance or similarity to what that event was like in Las Vegas to kick off the in-season tournament back in 2023 or whatever it was when we were out there, mark your calendars, Pacers fans. You're going to want to be around for that. There's going to be NBA things going on. And so I think that's one additional caveat that I would add to the schedule in this section that I think maybe is a little glimmer of hope amongst the winter is coming theme.
Yeah. And one other thing to even call out there too, in hope of, if you want to watch good basketball and you happen to have the week of Thanksgiving off or time off during that period, it's an awesome stretch. Basically, the weekend before leading up, it's Cleveland, New York, OKC, Philadelphia during the week of Thanksgiving. And then if you want to look at Christmas kind of time from the 20th to the 27th, you've got LA, Clippers and Lakers, Utah and Denver. So there's a lot of fun games and times. The issue is a lot of those games are away, so you're going to have to watch them at home. But it's going to be a really tough stretch, but it's going to be followed by the next set of games. And so the next set of games basically take place from the end of December through the middle of February. And I called this one the Wizard of Oz. There's no place like home. And that's because of 24 games in a month and a half, 17 are at home. So only 7 away. Now there's some back-to-backs in there, but there is 8 of 10 at home and another stretch of 9 of 10 at home with kind of a 4-game road trip in there with, again, a lot of highlight games in here. Probably the biggest one is going to be, ironically, a solo away game, which is Friday, this 5th of February at OKC. And we built this one up a few times because we're excited to kind of see Tyrese go back to that building. He hasn't returned since that injury because he didn't want to go unless he got to play. That is a primetime game on Prime, ironically. But there's also some very winnable games in these home stretches. You can kind of read it. It's like Minnesota, Chicago, Atlanta, Milwaukee, Brooklyn, Phoenix. Like, those are winnable. And then you do have a road trip set in here in mid-February or mid-January, but it's kind of a fun Eastern Conference road trip. You don't get to see a lot of those. It's Washington, Philadelphia, Boston, Detroit. So that's kind of the stretch where we're talking about the flows of the season right now. We got to start strong in the first 12, a lot of winnable games in there. The winner's coming stretch is going to be really, really hard. There's a lot of playoff contenders, championship contenders in there, some back-to-backs, a lot of road games. But then this stretch here is a time to, if you do fumble a little bit in that stretch, get back on track. Like I said, to have 2 10-game stretches where you have 8 and 9 home games in them, I don't care who you're playing. That's a lot of time in your own bed. It's a lot of practice time, which you don't really get in the NBA season. So it's a lot of time for the team to build some chemistry up, get that groove going. And so that is the stretch where we're going to be able to kind of bounce back before we kind of get back on the road.
I love that you called out OKC, because that to me was the one that I had circled in this stretch of games. That is where all eyes, and I know OKC's in that kind of winter is coming stretch. They're actually on a back-to-back, traveling back from New York. We got to come home to play OKC. That's why that stretch is brutal. But it's not that I'm not excited to see us play it at home. I absolutely am, and we'll look forward to that game. But it's exercising some demons, right, for Tyrese Haliburton. You mentioned it. Didn't make the trip last year in that, I think it was the only one you said that he didn't go to. I think he went to all the other buildings, at least until the shingles took over, and then he was kind of away from the team. But he intentionally did not go to OKC, was not ready to go back, and did not want to go back until he was able to play basketball. And I think that's something that you just have to look forward to as a Pacers fan. And it's one of the things that I'm actually really glad that they did put that as a nationally televised game. I know, Pacers fans love having those national TV games at home, but that's a road game that's worth televising. Now, what I'm going to call out here, just as a sidebar to your Wizard of Oz, is how stupid is the broadcast going to be? Because if you remember that Game 7 broadcast, they showed the highlight over and over and over. And that game, when we go back to OKC, that's what it's going to be. So I hope I can take the under of whatever the over-under is on number of replays for Tyrese's injury, because it's time to move forward. And I'm sure he feels the same way. But you said it, Ryan. That's after the tough stretch through November and December, you need a little reprieve. And this is where hopefully we're starting to see this team fire on all cylinders, creating momentum. I mentioned it. You want to have a little bit of that going into the All-Star break, because it's like a couple of things. Trade deadline season comes, right? And now it's like, all right, do we need to make a move? Are we a buyer? Are we a seller? What do those extensions look like for Jarris Walker, Ben Shepherd? Are they even meaningful players in the rotation? And you're going to get a lot of time to see, hopefully, some wins, some games at home, it's always a health thing too. You're much better off having guys in Indy when you're trying to get them sustained through the season, because they're able to work with the trainers here, be at home, all of that. Not that you can't set up a training table in a hotel room, but you hear guys talk about the importance of this stuff. And so to have that leading into the All-Star break, I think is actually a good thing. You're going to have a pretty good feel of where you're at record-wise, standings-wise at that point. And then it'll allow you to push kind of going post All-Star break. So where are we going after this kind of, Wizard of Oz segment?
Yeah, after the Wizard of Oz segment, the next breach is basically mid-February to towards the end of March. It's another tougher stretch, but I'll explain why. There's 16 games in this stretch, 11 away. So we kind of have to flip the script of not getting as many home games. But the players the teams we are playing aren't necessarily like top notch, it's like Golden State, Sacramento, Portland. We've got a Charlotte a couple times in there, a Houston, a Brooklyn. And so it's not really even marquee games. This is probably the least exciting stretch of the season post All-Star break that you're alluding to. And so I went with the Finding Nemo, just keep swimming. Just come off of that stretch. Just keep winning some games. There's a 4-game road trip in there. You've got a road trip in Orlando and Miami. So the nice thing is the travel's not terrible in here, actually, for having all those road games. Because like I said, you're out on a West Coast road trip, couple home games, then you're in Florida, then you're in Charlotte, Houston, Brooklyn. So obviously there's going to be some tough ones in there, but nothing killer in there. So I don't have a lot to take away. The end of the season we'll get to is really exciting. This is kind of just one of those, like, just find some wins, win some games you're not, try to win on the road, try to stay healthy. The nice thing is, you said, coming off of the All-Star break, hopefully they're kind of fresh. You can get your legs back under you. But I didn't really have any of these games really even like circled as one I'm really looking forward to, which is kind of ironic because we have 4 primetime games in there against Miami, Charlotte, Houston, and then Orlando.
So what I like most about this, Ryan, is that you talk about that West Coast swing, if you will, right? It's that Golden State, Sacramento, Portland. That's actually right into the All-Star break. So you're taking your big West Coast trip right before you're about to get a bunch of time off. And we know it's always harder to come back. And that's where you see guys, on those big West Coast swings, you see guys kind of tucker out, or maybe it's, you're kind of in the dog days of the season when you've got those big swings. I love that we're going to have a break. So we get back from Portland on the 18th. We don't return until the Minnesota on the 26th. So you're basically 8 days over All-Star break. Now, you could argue, are we going to have All-Stars on this team? I think Tyrese and Pascal will have a great case to make that team if our record is somewhere in the top 4 or 5 seeds of the East, but you just don't know. But I do love that kind of big swing is right into a break. I think those little scheduling nuances matter, frankly. And then the rest of it, like you said, I mean, you got Charlotte twice, Brooklyn, Milwaukee's in there, Memphis in there. Like, there's some teams that don't necessarily scare you. So you just got to keep swimming, right? And that's kind of where we're at. So I assume this next segment will be the final segment that gets us to game 82.
Yes, it is. It's the final 10 games of the season. It's a massive stretch. And so there was only one name to give it, and that's the Michael Scott threat level midnight stretch of these games. And that is because if you are looking at the Eastern Conference, and we have talked a lot about how the standings are likely going to be really close. Like, the difference between 43 wins and 46 wins and the over-unders on FanDuel right now are really close in terms of win totals in the East when you look basically at the top 10. And if I read you, I think it's our last 8 games. It's Chicago, Boston, Orlando, Toronto, Charlotte, Detroit, Cleveland, and New York. If you are in a battle with some of these teams, we control our destiny. This is awesome. This is exactly what you would almost draw it up. You basically have 90% of the playoff teams outside of maybe Miami in there that you have a chance to get a big win over. And these could be huge moments where it's like the 1st of April, we're going against Orlando. Yeah, I think we're better than Orlando, but maybe they have a good regular season. We're within half a game. That's a tiebreak game. That's a take the lead game. But that you could say that about anybody I just listed. And so this is going to be a perfect lead into the playoffs for us, because we're going to get a look at the Eastern Conference Finals, or the Eastern teams, likely probably play one of those potentially in the first round. Like, this is exactly what you want to see. Control your destiny, play the teams you're likely about to play, roll right into the playoffs. And you have to mention the marquee game at Madison Square Garden, final game of the season. Let's take it to the Knicks. We'll see what the standings looks like. This could not really have been a better scripted end to the season.
Well, I love it for all the reasons that you just said. First off, threat level midnight, Michael Scarn, Catherine Zeta-Jones, Dwig. I mean, if you're not picking up what we're putting down, you need to kind of go hit up Netflix or something. I guess it's on Peacock. Hopefully everybody's got Peacock, because all these games are on Peacock and Prime. You got to have every app under the sun at this point. But here nor there, Ryan, I couldn't have said it better myself. It's exactly what I thought when I looked at this stretch. I'm like, these are all Eastern Conference playoff hopefuls. And this is kind of what we've seen in the Western Conference, frankly, for the last couple of years, where it does come down to the final week of the season and all these teams, you can go from 2 to 7, right? And so we'll see if that's ultimately the case. I tweeted it out, as we were kind of going through this. I'm like, Eastern Conference Finals preview in Game 82. Did the league do that on purpose? I don't know. You get the Knicks way earlier in the season, basically all the way back in November, and then you don't see them again until the final game of the year. I hope we are on the upswing. I hope these games matter. I hope it's not a lot of rest. You wouldn't want a Knicks-Pacers game to be a throwaway necessarily, because I think that's just kind of a disservice to the fans. I do also have to say NBA rivalry week or all, on Amazon, we weren't even included in that. It's Knicks Hawks. Like, what are we doing? I think that's just one little note I had, but no, this is a really intriguing stretch of the year, depending upon where things are slotted, particularly Ryan, for those that are right around that 5, 6, 7, 8 number. Yeah. You're talking about solidifying playoff spot versus having to go to a play-in scenario where, frankly, depending upon who's got home court and what team, I mean, we've talked about on other shows, Philly could be a team that's a play-in team if they take a little while to get ramped up, or Joel Embiid misses a bunch of time. We know LeBron's not going to play, 82 games. He's always trying to nurse it till postseason time. So their record may not be reflective of how legitimate they could be pursuing a championship. And if you're, I know we don't play Philly in this stretch of the year, but my point is, if you fall into a play-in game against Philly, that is a very tough draw for any team, Pacers or otherwise. And so I think it's very interesting how it's all broken down. You've got some of them on the road, Toronto, Charlotte, Detroit. That's not ideal, but MSG, Game 82, that's the one you circle, and you just hope that there's some meaning behind it. And it'll be a great opportunity to kind of pick up the thread I was talking about at the beginning of the show. It's a great opportunity to see where you're at, matchup-wise, health-wise, who's New York playing at that point. I hope that that's a full starting lineup game, not a let's empty the two-way clip game, which we've seen in years past. But to your point, as competitive as the East is this year, it's probably meaningful. So to recap it for the fans, if you're not first, you're last. Ricky Bobby kicks us off. Game of Thrones, winter is coming in the middle segment there of the show. Wizard of Oz, that one, what was the tagline on that?
It was no place like home. That was the home stretch.
Yes, the home stretch. Okay, I'm sorry. Just keep swimming there through the All-Star break, and then we'll round things out with Threat Level Midnight. Did you have any additional notes? I've got a few things that I know fans always like to key in on, just kind of schedule statistics, but anything else in the tiers?
I didn't have any tiers, although one thing, and I'll let you get to the statistics maybe on like back-to-backs and other things, but the one thing that stood out to me as looking through the schedule, let me read off. If you are a weekend goer, enjoy your Fridays, work for the weekend, our Friday games are fucking awesome. Just let me read them down the list. Home opener against Dallas on a Friday. Next Friday game at Miami. Awesome. Next Friday game, home, New York. Next Friday at Cleveland. The next Friday game, Philadelphia. The next Friday game, OKC. The next Friday game, Minnesota. Like, these games rule. I mean, all of those. So if you enjoy getting to the weekend after a long week of work and want to sit back and watch Pacers, when we do play on Fridays, and it's not a ton, but when we do, it's going to be awesome games.
Ryan, we need to, I'm just throwing this out there. This is you and I BSing. We need to do some live remotes, like Friday night games. Go find, if you are listening to this show and you have an in at some sort of indie-based sports bar or whatever, please let us know. We've talked about this for how long? We did our live episode at the Slippery Noodle on Nikki's birthday a couple years ago. That was one for the record books. And if you're a longtime listener and don't remember that show, go look it up. I think it was game 6 of the finals. June 19th, my wife's birthday. You will be very pleased to go listen to that episode. Don't send it to my employer, but here nor there. I love the Friday call out because that's a lot of fun for fans to kind of roll into the weekend with some marquee games. I do want to hit just Ryan at a high level, things that fans pay attention to. I mentioned 11 national TV games spread out across Prime, Peacock, ESPN, etc. 6 at home, 5 away, so not a terrible mix there. We've got the showcase in Mexico City, not nationally televised, but something kind of unique. We'll kind of lose a home game for that. but I love that the Pacers have been a part of these. If you think about Paris, we did it in the Philippines, I think, for preseason. Couple of, I say a couple of years, that's more than a few, but that was back in the Victor Oladipo days. So that's something just to key in on. You mentioned back-to-backs, 15 back-to-backs. So that's a pretty average number. Frankly, a lot of these, the 11, I think we had a 12 or 13 national TV games a few years ago.
It's 13 to 16 back-to-backs now. So we're slightly on the high end, but basically by one. It is what it is.
It's the way it goes. We get a New Year's Eve game. That's something that I know fans always look forward to. That's Nikki and I's anniversary, so something that we'll be, kind of celebrating on. I did want to ask you just a couple of things, because a couple of the other notes we've already hit them. If you had to circle like your top 2 or 3 games, I know I'm putting you on the spot. What are those for you?
I would say outside of the opening night, because I think that's on the list, I would put the game after Thanksgiving, the 27th, at home against Philadelphia, getting to see the third time. Geez, you're right. That is be the third time we'll play Philadelphia.
Right at the start. Yeah.
But that's kind of a fun week. You come off Thanksgiving. It's Black Friday. Everybody's kind of home and in town. That's going to be a really fun game to go to. I have circled that Friday game at OKC. I'm with you. Primetime game. The broadcast might be unbearable at times, but also I think Tyrese is going to be really juiced for a game like that. And then the final game at Madison Square Garden, game 82. And gosh, if that game has meaning for it, whether it means a seeding between the Knicks and us, or even just, like you said, some team trying to avoid the play-in or whatever seeding could be, if there's any sort of meaning to that game, to get like an early sneak peek of the playoffs, basically with a playoff environment, that would be awesome. So what were yours?
Yeah, very similar. I had the 2 cup games, New York and Philly. You get them at home. That's exciting. So your other cup games are at Miami, at Cleveland, but you get the 2 at home that you probably really want to see. That's not a disrespect to Giannis and the Heat, but like we've kind of been there, done that with Giannis. It's not that I'm not excited for that game, but having New York and Philly in the building is awesome. And then it's the OKC one for me. That is something that I think will get lost in this whole season. I very much want to have a finals rematch, OKC and the Pacers. Yeah. That is something that, to me, from a storyline perspective, from the revenge tour that we kind of mentioned on our last episode, that starts to check all the boxes. And frankly, for basketball fans, it was an incredible finals. I mean, that was one of the better finals that we've seen, in the last 5 or 6 years. So those were the ones that I had circled. And listen, if you're a Pacers fan, you come out of this schedule release and you say, all right, game on, let's go. Like, I mean, everybody's sleeping on us. No respect for Tyrese's return. We're going to get a lot of our rivals early in the year, particularly in that cup sequence. Let's see how we stack up early. And then fireworks late, like you said, like all of those Eastern Conference games against playoff teams to round out the season. It's going to be a hell of a year. I'm so excited that we are now at the point of the offseason, Ryan, where we are actually talking about games on the calendar. We can start really getting into what does this look like. It's going to be here before we know it. So anything else from your side before we wrap this one up?
No, this is one of the more fun shows we've done in a while.
Yeah, a hell of a lot of fun. Pacers fans, appreciate you guys listening. As always, be sure to check out our giveaway. We're giving away 2 tickets to the charity auction game here coming up on August 24th. I haven't read out the post yet. I need to get it up. It'll be on our Twitter, pinned at the top of the profile. Check it out. Get entered. Let's go.